Wide open prairie, southwest Kansas, March 1991. A flat, white morning under a sky that does not believe in promises. Wind moves across 200 miles of buffalo grass and carries the dust against a beige canvas tent. 40 trucks parked in 2 crooked rows inside the tent. 42 grown men folding chairs, bad coffee, cigarette smoke holding still in the cold. A boot steps through the flap, small, worn, crusted with caliche from a section road. Then a brown chore coat, too big in the shoulders, the cuffs shiny from years of fence wire. Then a face, 15 years old. In her left hand a bitter card, number 18. In her right a folded blue map, creased so many times the folds have turned white. Inside her pocket, $682 in cash. A man in the second row turns his head. Pressed denim, new boots, a portable phone on the chair beside him. He stops, smiling. The wind came first, cold, mean, carrying dust fine enough to find the back of your throat before you knew you'd opened your mouth. March 3rd, 1991, Stevens County, Kansas. 6 in the morning and the sky already looked tired. A girl was driving south on Route 51 in a 1978 Chevy pickup that smelled of motor oil and old hay. The heater only worked when the truck was climbing a hill. The truck was not climbing. Her name was Hannah Rilke. She was 15 years old. In her left hand, a bitter card, number 18. In her right, a folded blue county soil map, creased so many times the folds had turned white, like bone showing through skin. And in the inside pocket of her father's brown chore coat, a grocery store envelope, $682. Cash. Enough for a deposit. Not enough to be wrong. The coat was too big in the shoulders, the cuffs shiny from years of fence wire and engine grease. It smelled of her father, even though her father had been dead almost 6 years. Hannah did not cry about that anymore. She had learned the trick of breathing through the part of her chest that did not hurt. The radio was off because she needed to think. Because if she heard a single song, she would start hoping, and hope was a luxury her checking account could not afford. So she drove, and the cold came up through the floorboards, and the dust came in through the seams of the door, and the prairie ran flat and pale on both sides of her, all the way to a horizon that did not believe in promises. She was going to a foreclosure auction. She had told her mother she was going to study chemistry with her friend Lorelei in town. That was the first lie of the morning. It would not be the last. 13 miles south of Hugoton, the road bent west and the tent appeared. A big rented canvas thing, beige. The wind shaking it like it was trying to wake it up. Trucks parked in 2 long, uneven rows. Maybe 40 of them. Most of them belonged. A few did not. The ones that did not were too clean. Hannah pulled in at the back, killed the engine, sat for 1 long second with both hands still on the wheel. Her hands were too small for that wheel. Her hands had always been too small for everything except writing in margins. She closed her eyes. You are not your grandfather, she thought. Except you are. Except your hands are the same shape as his were. Except his cedar chest is sitting in the back bedroom, and inside it are 40 years of reasons. Except you read the table 3 times, then you read it again, and the number was still the number, 312 feet. She opened her eyes. She got out of the truck. The cold hit her like an open hand. Inside the tent there was coffee. Bad coffee. The kind that smelled like the inside of a thermos that had been used in 1972 and never properly cleaned. There were folding chairs in crooked rows. There was a plywood platform. There were 42 men and 2 women, and the women were the auctioneer's wife and the clerk. Hannah was the 3rd woman. She felt that the second she walked in, a few heads turned. Not many. The kind of half-turn men do when they're not yet sure if something is interesting enough to be worth their full attention. She kept her chin level, because Grandpa Elias had told her once when she was 8 years old and afraid of a sale barn full of strangers, that if you raised your chin half an inch, nobody could see what your eyes were doing. She raised her chin half an inch. She walked to the back row. She sat down. She unfolded the blue map across her knees and pressed it flat with both hands. The map made a sound like dry leaves. 2 rows ahead, a man in pressed denim and new boots leaned over to his neighbor and said something low. The neighbor laughed. The pressed denim man did not. He was looking at her. 42 years old, tall, square-jawed. The kind of face that had practiced being friendly in a mirror until it almost worked. A portable phone the size of a brick sat on the chair beside him. His name was Garrett Holloway. Hannah did not know that yet, but she would. Now go back 14 months. January 18th, 1990. A Thursday. 26 degrees, no wind. The kind of cold that just sits on everything. Hannah was 14. She walked out to the machine shed at 5:42 in the afternoon because Grandpa Elias had not come in for supper. Grandpa Elias always came in for supper. The shed door was open 3 inches. Hannah remembered that detail later more than any other. 3 inches. Just enough for the cold to find him. He was on the concrete floor between the workbench and the orange shop light. His hat was off. His glasses had slid down to the tip of his nose. His left hand was open. His right hand was closed around something. She knelt beside him. She did not scream. She had been raised by a man who had taught her from the time she was small that the most important thing in a hard moment was to look. Just look before you do anything else. So she looked. She saw that his eyes were already gone soft. She saw that his lips had gone pale. She saw the brass conductivity meter on the bench above him, with its needle resting at 0. She saw the boots he had worn for 19 winters and the place on the right boot where the leather had cracked into a smile. Then she opened his right hand. There was a yellow sheet of notebook paper folded twice. She unfolded it. 1 sentence, written in his slow, careful hand. Read what they skip for the next year. She did not understand it yet. She would. The funeral was small. The casket was closed. Margaret had not been able to look. Margaret was the kind of woman who had decided around the age of 30 that grief was a country she would not visit twice. She had already visited it once, 5 years before, for Wendell. Hannah sat in the front pew between her mother and an empty space. The empty space was where her father should have been. The empty space was where her father had been for almost 6 years. The pastor back then, it was old Pastor Hovland, who would retire that summer and be replaced by a younger man named Asa Beale, who would matter very much very soon, read from the book of Job, then from Ecclesiastes, then from a small notebook he had kept on Elias for over 20 years. He said Elias Rilke was a quiet man. He said Elias Rilke had spent 40 years measuring slopes and soil and shale and well logs, and he had done it not because the government paid him, but because somebody had to remember what the land was doing while the men on top of it were arguing about prices. He said Elias kept records. He said Elias was a record himself. Hannah did not cry during the service. She cried in the truck on the way home, quiet, without moving her face. Margaret pretended not to see. That night, Hannah opened the cedar chest in the back bedroom for the first time. Inside there was a smell of old paper and dry pine and dust. Inside there were maps. Inside there were logs. Inside there were 40 years of proof. She had been 7 the first time he took her out, a Saturday in October. She remembered because the school bus had let her off into a yard full of yellow leaves the day before, and the leaves were still there when Grandpa Elias pulled up in his government pickup. He called it a drive. It was not a drive. He stopped at a barbed wire fence 3 miles from the house. He handed her a pencil. He pointed across the pasture. "Mark where the buffalo grass changes color," he said. She squinted. "Where you tell me." She slid down off the seat. She walked along the fence line. She found the line not a line, really more like a frontier where the grass shifted from one shade of pale to another shade of pale that was almost identical but not. She came back and marked it on the page. Grandpa Elias looked. He nodded once. That was the whole lesson. She did not understand for 2 more years why the color change mattered, why it told you the salt content, why salt content told you what had happened underneath 50,000 years ago, when the inland sea had pulled back and left its mineral fingerprint behind. But she remembered the nod, because the nod was the thing. The nod said you saw it. The land is talking. Most people are not listening. By 10, she could tell a shallow well from a deep one by the taste of water on the end of a finger. By 12, she could compare a soil survey to a driller's log and see where the official description and the actual ground did not quite agree. By 14, she understood the sentence she would not be able to put into words for another year. The land keeps records even when people don't. She was 15 now, and every grown man in that tent on March 3rd was about to find out. But first, she had to live through the 11 months between her grandfather's funeral and the auction. And those 11 months were not gentle. Margaret Rilke was 38 years old. She had been widowed at 33. She worked part-time at the co-op in Hugoton 2.5 days a week, doing books for a man named Roy Lindstrand, who paid her in checks that always cleared but never quite covered. She came home at 6. She made supper. She washed the dishes. She went to bed at 9:30. She did not laugh. She did not cry. She did not look at Hannah's grandfather's room for the first 3 months after he died. When she finally did, she stood in the doorway for a long time. She said, "He left you that chest." "I know," Hannah said. "You can keep it." Hannah did not answer. "You can keep it," Margaret said again. "But Hannah, honey, listen to me." She turned. She was crying. Not loud, just leaking. Your grandfather was a good man. He was a careful man. He was a man I loved." "Okay, Mama." "But Hannah, he was also a man who... He was a man who..." She could not finish. Hannah waited. "He was a man who chased the ground," Margaret said finally. "He chased it, like it was going to forgive him for something." Hannah did not say anything. "He chased it all the way to 74, and it killed him. A heart attack killed him, Mama. A heart attack found him in that shed, because he was out there, alone, looking at a meter, in the cold." Margaret wiped her face with the back of her wrist. "Promise me," she said. "What?" "Promise me you won't chase it." Hannah did not promise. She nodded. A nod she had learned from her grandfather could mean many things. A nod could mean yes. A nod could mean I hear you. A nod could mean I respect your grief too much to argue with it right now. Margaret took the nod. She closed the door. She did not come back into that room for 6 more months. About her father. Wendell Rilke. Dead at 36. A combine accident. October 9th, 1985. The county coroner had ruled it an industrial fatality. The combine was a used John Deere model that Wendell had bought 18 months before from a dealer up in Liberal who had assured him the unit had been fully refurbished. It had not been fully refurbished. The header drive had a known defect, a bearing housing that the manufacturer had quietly recalled in 1981. The dealer had not done the recall. Margaret had tried to sue. She had lost. The dealer had a lawyer from Wichita who wore a suit that cost more than the combine. The lawyer had argued that Wendell had failed to maintain the equipment to spec. The judge had agreed. The judge had been a friend of the dealer for 19 years. Margaret had not appealed. Margaret had paid off the lawyer she had retained, sold the combine for scrap, kept the house, and decided never again. She had decided this with a clarity that made her smaller. Hannah was 9 when this happened. Hannah had a memory of her father that was mostly a sound, a laugh, a specific laugh. 3 short bursts in a row, the second slightly higher than the first, and the third lower than both. She did not know at 9 that the dealer's name had been Holloway. She did not know at 15 either. She would learn at 6:15 on the morning of March 3rd, 1991, from a 67-year-old widow named Verna Marsh in a canvas tent in Stevens County, in a whisper that would change everything. But that was still 19 pages away. Through the spring and summer of 1990, Hannah read, not the way kids read, the way an apprentice reads after the master has died. She started with the county soil surveys. There were 3: Stevens County, Morton County, Seward County. Each one weighed more than a pound. the maps folded out of the back like wings. She read them at the kitchen table after chores, by the yellow overhead light, with a glass of milk going warm beside her elbow. She read the symbols until the symbols became sentences. She read the driller's logs that her grandfather had collected, handwriting so bad it looked like barbed wire, notes in pencil from 1956, 1961, 1968. Names of farmers' depths, of wells' gallons per minute, water-tasting notes that said, brackish sweet sulfur, good. She read the state groundwater bulletins that smelled of basement shelves and mouse dust. She read the drought tables. She read the well bulletins. She read every single thing in that cedar chest. It took her 8 months. She did not tell her mother. She did not tell Lorelei. She did not tell anyone, because she did not yet know what she was reading toward. She was just doing what the yellow notes said. Read what they skip. Now. The first twist. It came on a Tuesday in November. Hannah had been pulling out the bottom layer of the chest. The deepest stuff. The oldest stuff. The papers her grandfather had filed when she was still in elementary school. She found a manila envelope she had not opened before. It was labeled in Elias's careful pencil. To go back to. She opened it. Inside there was no map. Inside there was a list. Names. 19 of them. Each one a family from the area she had known her whole life. The Crawfords. The Pinneys. Old Mrs. Brackett out toward Moscow. The Lindstrands, the same Lindstrand who employed her mother, Roy. The Marshes, Verna Marsh and her late husband, Harlan. The Scomars. The Pruitt brothers. Old Doc Weinholt, who had not actually been a doctor but a horse vet. The Eskilsons. Beside each name, a parcel number. A section, a township, a range. And beside each parcel, a note in her grandfather's hand. Confined sand below 290. Will flow if pump installed at correct depth. Shallow gravel ribbon on north edge. Stock water only. Sufficient. Old McKinney well log incorrect. Real depth 260. Pull casing and reperforate. 2 undocumented seeps along east fence. Adequate for 30 head. Hannah sat back. She read the list again. She read it 3 times. She understood slowly the way you understand a hard thing. Slowly with your stomach before your head what she was holding. These were not her grandfather's investments. These were not parcels he had wanted to buy. These were people. These were neighbors. These were 19 families that her grandfather had quietly studied over 40 years, so that someday when each of them was on the edge, he could walk over with a folder and say, "There is water on your place, right here. You don't have to leave." He had not gotten to do it. He had died first. Hannah held the list against her chest. She did not cry. She got up. She walked to the window. The wind was moving across the pasture in long, shallow waves. The land was talking. It had been talking the whole time. February 1991. It was cold. 12 degrees in the morning, 18 in the afternoon. The wind chill, brutal. Hannah was sitting at the kitchen table with a state water bulletin she had read 4 times already. Number 18C. A skinny pamphlet from 1977. pale blue cover, the kind of document you only opened if somebody paid you to. She was reading the appendix. The appendix was a table. The table listed test holes drilled for a USGS reconnaissance survey across 3 counties in southwest Kansas in the summer of 1977. 14 holes. Most of them not interesting. Most of them just confirming what people already knew. But test hole number 11. Test hole number 11 was different. It had been drilled on a quarter section just south of Hugoton. It had been drilled to 410 feet. At 312 feet, the drillers had hit a confined sandstone bed under positive pressure. They had measured the static head. They had recorded the flow. 9.5 gallons per minute. Then they had moved on, because 9.5 gallons per minute was not big enough to make anyone rich. Because 9.5 gallons per minute would not run a center pivot. Because the report writers in 1977 had been looking for irrigation aquifers, not stock water, and stock water did not pay their salaries. So they had noted it and moved on. And nobody since had opened the report until a 15-year-old girl in Stevens County did. Hannah checked the legal description of test hole 11. She checked it against the parcel maps in the front of the bulletin. She checked it against the foreclosure sale bill that had come in the mail 2 weeks earlier, advertising the upcoming Harkness auction on March 3rd. The legal description of test hole number 11 matched. It matched Tract 4. Tract 4. The dry quarter, the dead pond, the leaning tower, the piece every man in the county had written off before the sale even started, the piece the auction bill described in one merciless line. No active well, no irrigation right, surface only. Sold as is. Hannah set the bulletin down. She set the sale bill beside it. She set her grandfather's yellow note on top of both. Read what they skip. She got up. She walked to her room. She counted the money in her grocery store envelope. $682. It was enough for a 10% deposit on a parcel that nobody else wanted. If nobody else wanted it, which was almost certainly true. Almost. The next morning, Hannah drove to the parsonage on the east edge of Hugoton. The parsonage was a small brick house with a porch that needed paint. The new pastor, the one who had taken over from Hovland the previous June, was a 34-year-old man named Asa Beal. Asa Beal was lean, quiet, soft-spoken. He had moved out from Lawrence with his wife and 2 small daughters. He drank his coffee black. He kept a folded handkerchief in his back pocket. He had grown up on a wheat farm outside Salina and had not stopped being a farmer in any of the ways that mattered. He had also been one of Elias Rilke's last close friends. Hannah knocked. He opened. "Hannah Rilke," he said. He said it the way you would say the name of a song you remembered fondly. "I need to ask you something," Hannah said. He held the door wider. She came in. The house smelled of coffee and pencil shavings, which made her chest tighten because Grandpa Elias had also smelled like pencil shavings every day of his life. She sat at his kitchen table. She told him about the bulletin. She told him about test hole 11. She told him about her plan. She did not tell him about the list of 19 families. Not yet. That was hers. Asa listened with his hands folded under his chin. When she finished, he did not say anything for a long minute. Then he said, "Your grandfather wrote me a letter. The last letter he wrote anyone, I think." Hannah waited. "I haven't shown it to anyone. I almost didn't keep it." He stood up. He left the kitchen. He came back with an envelope. He laid it on the table. He did not open it. "I want you to read it," he said. "But before you do, I want to tell you a name." "Okay, Garrett Holloway." Hannah did not recognize it. "Holloway is a man," Asa said. "He is 42 years old. He owns 3 businesses out of Wichita. One of them is a farm equipment dealership. One of them is a land company. One of them is well. We don't quite know what the third one is, but it does paperwork." Asa took a breath. "For the last 8 years, your grandfather had been quietly tracking him, the way a man tracks a coyote that's been working a calf herd." "Why?" Hannah said. "Because Holloway has a pattern," Asa said. "He sells equipment, used equipment, refurbished, he says, but the refurbishing is incomplete. And the equipment fails. And when the equipment fails, the farm is in trouble. And then a company linked to Holloway shows up about 4 months later with a foreclosure offer. He has done it many times." Hannah felt the room turn slightly. "Your grandfather had a folder," Asa said. "A folder of cases. 11 of them last he showed me. 11 families that had been hurt. He could not prove the link. Not in court. He was a soil man, not a lawyer. But he knew. The way a soil man knows when a slope is going to slip 3 years before it slips." Hannah's mouth was dry. He gave the folder to a state legislator from Garden City in November of 1989. The legislator said he would look into it. The legislator did not look into it. Asa rubbed the bridge of his nose. "That was the last fight your grandfather had in him. And 6 weeks later, he was dead." Hannah looked down at the envelope on the table. She did not open it. She said, "Tract 4. The Harkness piece. The auction. Will Holloway be there?" Asa did not answer right away. When he answered carefully. "Holloway has been buying foreclosure parcels in this county for 6 years. He has bought 11 of them. He has never bought one without showing up in person." So yes," Hannah said. "So yes," Asa said. Hannah put her hand on the envelope. She did not open it. She said, "May I take this with me? To read at home?" "You may." She took it. She stood up. At the door, she turned and asked one more question. The one that had been building in her chest since the word equipment had come out of Asa Beal's mouth. "The combine," she said. "The one that killed my father. The dealer in Liberal. In 1985. Asa Beal's face did something complicated. He did not lie to her. He said Holloway was on the title for that dealership until 1986. He sold his interest after the lawsuit. He sold it to a cousin. The cousin still runs it." Hannah did not move. "I'm sorry," Asa said. "I would have told you sooner. I was waiting for you to be ready." "I'm ready," Hannah said. She walked to the truck. She drove home. She did not cry until she was a mile from the house. Then she pulled the truck over. Then she let it come. For 10 minutes. Then she wiped her face. Then she drove the last mile. Then she went inside and made supper, and sat across from her mother and said nothing. That night she read Asa's envelope by lamplight. The letter was in Grandpa Elias's slow, careful hand. It said many things. 2 of them mattered. The first: if a 15-year-old girl ever reads what I've been reading, do not call her crazy. Listen to her. The second: Holloway is the kind of man who only quits when he sees that the room has turned against him. Do not try to face him in a small room. Take him into a big one. Hannah folded the letter twice. She put it in the cedar chest. She went to bed. She did not sleep. She did not sleep the night of March 2nd either. She lay on her back with her hands folded on her stomach and listened to the wind work the eaves. She thought about her father. She thought about the laugh she could not quite remember anymore. She thought about her grandfather on the concrete floor of the machine shed, with the yellow note in his closed right hand. She thought about the list of 19 families. She thought about Holloway in the picture Asa had shown her, smiling on the cover of a regional real estate brochure. She thought about the $682 in the grocery store envelope. She thought, I am 15. She thought, I am alone. She thought, no, I am not alone. I have 19 names. I have a yellow note. I have a meter that still works. I have a coat that fits. She got up at 4:15. She made coffee she did not drink. She put on her father's brown chore coat. She drove south on Route 51. The wind was already up. The auction tent was full by 9:45. Hannah had been sitting in the back row for almost 90 minutes by then. She had not stood. She had not stretched. She had not let her eyes go to the front of the room. She had watched everything peripherally. She watched Garrett Holloway come in at 8:30. He had not seen her. He had set up his portable phone on a folding chair. He had shaken hands with a man from Amarillo and a man from Denver and a small, dapper auction broker from Wichita. He had laughed at something the Amarillo man said. His laugh was 3 short bursts in a row, the second slightly higher than the first, and the third lower than both. Hannah had not moved. She had not breathed for the entire duration of that laugh. Because the laugh was wrong. She had told herself all her life that her father's laugh was the most particular sound in the world. That nobody else laughed like that. That she would know it anywhere. She had been right. She knew it now. Garrett Holloway had her father's laugh, or, no, he had a similar laugh. 3 short bursts, the pattern of 3, common. Many men laughed in 3s. She had to stop. She had to stop, or she would crack open in this chair, and the entire tent would see it. She closed her eyes. She put her hand on the blue map. She breathed through the part of her chest that didn't hurt. When she opened her eyes again, there was an old woman sitting in the chair beside her. Verna Marsh, 67 years old, widow, skin like a folded paper bag, eyes the color of well water. She had been one of the 19 names on Grandpa Elias's list. She had also, 3 months earlier, brought a tuna casserole to Margaret and Hannah on the anniversary of Wendell's death. Verna did not look at Hannah. She looked straight ahead. She said in a voice low enough to die under the next gust of wind, "You know who that man is." Hannah did not turn. "I know," she said. Verna's hands were folded on her purse. "My Harlan," Verna said. "Yes, ma'am." My Harlan bought a bailer from him in '83. The bailer killed him in '84. Hannah closed her eyes for 1 second, opened them. "I didn't know that," she whispered. "Nobody knew that. That's how he does it. He sells the equipment in one county, and the equipment kills somebody in another county, and the paperwork goes to Wichita, and the trail is just dust by the time you go looking." Verna's voice did not shake. "Your daddy bought from his place too," she said. "Different lot, different decade, same hand on the title." "I know now," Hannah said. There was a long pause. Then Verna said, "What are you doing here, child?" "I'm here to buy Tract 4. "Why?" "There's water under it." Verna turned. For the first time, she looked at Hannah directly. Her eyes had a fierceness in them that did not belong on a 67-year-old face. "Your grandfather," Verna said. "Yes, ma'am." "He was a good man." "Yes, ma'am." "He found water on my place in '68. I never had to leave because of him." "Did he tell you that?" "I found his list," Hannah said. "You're on it." "I'm sorry I'm only saying that to you now." Verna's eyes filled. She did not let the tears go. "Tract 4, she said. "Yes, ma'am." "Hannah Rilke." "Yes, ma'am." "How much money you got?" $682. Lord, Verna said. She turned back to the front. "You hold up your card when the time comes," she said. "You hold it up. You don't look anywhere but at the auctioneer. You understand me?" "Yes, ma'am." "And Hannah." "Yes, ma'am. You're not by yourself in this tent, even if it looks like you are. You're not." Hannah did not answer. She did not have to. At 10:04, Marlon Crisp stepped up onto the plywood platform and tapped the microphone twice. Marlon was 62 years old, silver-haired, narrow as a gatepost, the most famous auctioneer in southwest Kansas. He could move cattle so fast, the numbers sounded like weather. He looked across the tent. He saw a 15-year-old girl in the back row in an oversized brown coat. He leaned toward the clerk. He said just loud enough for the two men in front to hear, "Somebody's daughter came to watch grown men lose money." The two men chuckled. Hannah heard. She did not turn her head. The first 3 tracts went the way everyone had expected. The house tract sold high, $86,000 to a cattleman from Morton County. The good grass tract brought 2 local bidders into a hard, short fight, settled at $61,000. The tract with the working windmill went to the man from Morton County. Again. He had sworn all week he was not going to bid on it. He had raised his card before Marlon finished the opening number. Hannah did not move. She sat with the blue map folded on her lap and watched adults buy what they could see. At 10:47, Marlon called Tract 4. His voice changed. "Auctioneers have a way of telling a crowd what they think of a parcel without actually telling them. Marlon read the description flat and fast. Tract 4. 160 acres dry land. No active well. No irrigation allotment. Existing windmill non-functional. Sold as is. He looked up. Who will give me 50 an acre? Nothing. Marlon smiled thinly. 40. A man in the back snorted. 30. Still nothing. Then a salvage buyer from Garden City raised his card. 25, he said. He wanted the fence posts in the tower. Maybe the right to cut it into 5-acre dreams for people moving west with more hope than cash. Marlon caught the bid. He rolled into his chant. I have 25, looking for 30. 30 now. 30. Hannah raised bidder card number 18. She raised it slowly. Not high. Just high enough. The laughter came before the number did. Some of it was quiet. Some of it was not. Marlon saw the card. He paused for the smallest breath. Then his reflexes took over. 30 with number 18. The salvage buyer turned all the way around in his chair. He stared at her the way a man looks at a gate he was certain had been locked. He raised his card. 35. Hannah did not hesitate. 39, she said. Her voice was not loud, but it carried. The tent went quiet in a new way. Garrett Holloway looked up. He had not until this moment been paying any real attention to Tract 4. He had been waiting for Tract 5, the corner with road frontage, that he planned to subdivide for a strip of prefab homes. Tract 4 was supposed to go to the salvage buyer for $35 an acre, the way everyone in the room had assumed it would. Holloway looked at the girl. Then he looked at Tract 4 on his sale map. Then he looked at the girl again. His face did something. A small flicker. Something behind the friendliness slid into place. He raised his card. 44, he said. The tent rippled. Marlon looked from the salvage buyer to Holloway to the girl in the back. He blinked. He recalibrated. I have 44, looking for 45. Hannah's heart was making a sound she could hear in her teeth. 48, she said. The room actually shifted. 42 folding chairs creaked at the same time. Holloway smiled. He turned in his seat. He looked at her the way a banker looks at a small overdrawn account before he refuses the loan. 52, he said. Marlon was now rolling. I have 52. 53 anywhere. Hannah's hand was on her bidder card, and her bidder card was halfway up before she let her brain catch up with her arm. She did the math. 53 an acre on 160 acres was 8,480. 10% down was 848. She had 682. She could not. She had to. She could not. Her arm was at her chest. Her card was facing in. She had not raised it. Then, from the third row, a voice, low, steady. 53 with number 8. The tent turned. Verna Marsh. She was holding her card flat against her chest almost casually, but it was raised. She was not smiling. Marlon hesitated. Then, from the fifth row, another voice, older, gruff, 54 with number 12, Joel Pinney, whose grandfather had bought a tractor from Holloway in '79, whose grandfather had nearly lost the family quarter when the tractor's hydraulics failed in a side hill cut. Joel Pinney had not come to bid that day. Joel Pinney had come to watch. Now he had a card up. Then, from the second row, Roy Lindstrand, Margit Rilke's employer, Hannah's mother's boss, 46 years old. A man who had said maybe 10 words to Hannah in her entire life. 55 with number 7, he said. Marlon Crisp's mouth opened slightly. He had been auctioneering for 38 years. He had never seen this. He had seen rings, small cabals of local men quietly conspiring to hold prices down on a piece of equipment. He had seen runaways, the wild ascending wars between two stubborn buyers. He had seen low, quiet days when nothing sold. He had never seen a tent turn against a single bidder in 15 seconds without saying a word about it. He looked at Holloway. Holloway's face had gone very still. The man from Amarillo beside him leaned over and whispered something. Holloway did not respond. Holloway lifted his card. 57, he said. Hannah's hand was shaking now. She lowered it to her lap. She set the blue map flat across her knees. She pressed both hands to the map. She was no longer the buyer. She was the audience. The tent had taken over. 58 with number 8, Verna said. 59 with number 12, Joel said. 60 with number 7, Roy said. It went around the room like a slow shared breath. Each name went up $1. Just one. Each name held the card for 1 second. Each name lowered it again. It was not a bidding war. It was a wall. Holloway lifted his card one more time. 65, he said. His voice was tighter now. 66 with number 8. 67 with number 12. 68 with number 7. 69 with number 21. That last one came from the back. A man Hannah did not even know. Eskelson. Another name from the list. Holloway turned in his seat. He took a long look around the tent. He saw what he was seeing. He counted. There were at least 11 raised cards, maybe 12. He understood. He understood the way a coyote understands when it has walked into a circle of dogs. His jaw worked once. Then he set his bidder card down on the chair beside him. He did not raise it again. Marlon waited. The room waited. Marlon's voice came back quieter than usual. I have 69 with number 21. Looking for 70. 70 anywhere. A long pause. And then, because the wall had done its work, every single one of those raised cards came down at once, as if a single string had been cut. Marlon looked at the back of the tent. Number 18. Hannah looked up. Do you wish to bid? The auctioneer asked. She raised her card. 39, she said. The tent did not laugh. Not this time. Marlon's face did something his face did not usually do during an auction. He almost smiled. I have 39 with number 18, he said. His voice was rolling again, looking for 40. 40 anywhere. Silence. Going once. Silence. Going twice. Silence. The gavel struck plywood. Sold. Tract 4. Number 18. Hannah Rilke had bought 160 acres for $6,240. The deposit was $624. She had $58 left in the envelope after that. She walked to the clerk's table. Her hands did not shake until she started counting. The clerk counted it back twice. She signed the purchase agreement in a tight, careful hand. She did not look at Holloway. She did not have to. She could feel him watching her from the second row. She walked back to the back of the tent. Verna Marsh took her elbow as she passed. Verna did not say anything. She just squeezed. Once, then let go. Hannah walked out of the tent into the cold March wind. She walked to her grandfather's truck. She sat in the driver's seat with both hands on the wheel. She did not start the engine. She put her forehead against the wheel. And then, finally, for the first time since 5:42 p.m. on January 18th, 1990, for the first time since a 15-year-old girl had opened her grandfather's closed right hand on the concrete floor of a machine shed, for the first time in 14 months, Hannah Rilke cried. Not loud, not for long. Just enough to let some of it out before the next thing. Because there would be a next thing. There would be the deposit. There would be the balance. There would be a driller. There would be a court. There would be a man named Garrett Holloway who had just lost a quarter section he had not even wanted yesterday, and who would now want it more than anything he had wanted in 8 years. But that was for the next part of the story. This part of the story ended with a 15-year-old girl with her forehead on a steering wheel in a 1978 Chevy pickup in a parking lot full of men who had finally stopped laughing. The wind was still up. The dust was still moving. The land was still talking. And for the first time in her life, for the very first time, Hannah Rilke understood that her grandfather had not left her a chest of paper. He had left her a tent full of people who had been waiting for years for somebody to give them a reason to stand up. She lifted her head. She wiped her face. She started the truck. She drove home. She had a mother to face. She had a phone call to make. She had a driller to find. She had $8,480 to come up with in 10 banking days. And she had folded in the inside pocket of her father's brown chore coat a list of 19 names. 18 of those names had just shown her in the loudest silence she had ever heard exactly what she was supposed to do next. The 19th name was her own. The phone was already ringing when Hannah opened the kitchen door. Margaret was standing at the counter with her back to the phone, not picking it up, not turning. Her hands were flat on the laminate fingers spread the way a person braces against the wall during an earthquake. The phone rang. Once more, then stopped. Hannah took 2 steps inside. The door closed behind her. The kitchen smelled of bacon grease from breakfast and the cold coming off Hannah's coat. Margaret did not turn. Roy called Margaret, said, "Mama." Roy called from the co-op. He said he'd just come back from an auction. Mama. He said he'd seen the funniest thing he'd ever seen in his life. Hannah did not move. He said my daughter bought a quarter section. Hannah set her keys on the table. He said the whole tent stood up for her. Mama, he said. Margot's voice broke. He said. She turned. Her face was not angry. Her face was something worse than angry. Her face was the face of a woman who had spent 6 years arranging the furniture of her life around a wound, and who had just watched her daughter walk into the same wound carrying a bitter card. You promised me, Margot said. I didn't. Hannah, you nodded. A nod is not a promise. Don't you do that to me. You don't get to play language with me right now. Mama, you don't get to. Margot's hands came up, then went back down. She did not know what to do with her hands. She walked past Hannah. She walked into the back bedroom, the one with the cedar chest, the one she had not entered in 6 months. Hannah followed. Margot was already on her knees. She had the chest open. She was pulling things out, slowly, not violently, almost tenderly, the way you would empty a coffin. Maps, logs, bulletins, pencils, a brass conductivity meter, a yellow notepad, a folded shop towel. She set each thing on the rug. She did not look up. You know what your grandfather did? She said. He taught me. He taught me how to. Not that. Before that. Before you. Okay. He bought a quarter, Margot said. Hannah was quiet. 1985. The summer before your father died. Okay. He bought a quarter, down by Liberal. He told us there was water under it. 320 feet. He had a report. He had a map. He had a story. He had everything you have in that chest right now. Hannah did not move. He drilled the well, Margot said. He drilled it himself with old vetters. He went deep. He went deeper. He spent every dollar of his pension. He spent the loan on our combine. The combine your father had to buy used after that, because we couldn't afford a new one. The combine that, Mama. The combine that. Mama, stop. I'm not stopping, Hannah. Okay. I'm not stopping, okay. The well went dry. The well your grandfather promised would change everything. The well that was gonna put you through college. That well was a hole in the ground. And the hole is still there. I can take you to it tomorrow. Hannah's chest was hot. Mama. Mama, listen. You listen. Mama, what if? What if he was right about the water and just wrong about the depth? What if? What if? What if pigs flew? Mama. What if your father was right about the dealer and just wrong about the lawyer? The kitchen was silent except for the refrigerator. What if your grandfather was right about that report and just wrong about the year? Mama, please. I have already given my what-ifs to 2 graves, Hannah. Hannah sat down on the floor. She did not say anything. Margaret sat down too, across the open chest, her hands in her lap. After a long time, Margaret said, "Tell me." "What?" "Tell me what you have." Hannah reached into the chest. She pulled out the manila envelope labeled "to go back to." She opened it. She handed Margaret the list. Margaret read it. Her face changed. It changed the way ice changes when the temperature drops one more degree, past what you thought was already the bottom. "Verna Marsh," Margaret whispered. "Yes, ma'am." "Roy Lindstrand." "Yes, ma'am." "Joel Pinney." "Yes, ma'am." "These are the people who—" "Yes, ma'am." "These are the people who showed up today." "Yes, ma'am." "He never told me," Margaret said. "Maybe he didn't want to disappoint you twice." Margaret looked up sharply, but she did not argue. She read the list again. She read each name like it was a verse. When she got to the bottom, she folded the paper in half. She held it against her chest. She said very quietly, "He was going to give it away." "Yes, ma'am." "He was going to give all of it away." "Yes, ma'am." "For free." "Yes, ma'am." Margaret closed her eyes. "He never told me," she said again. Hannah reached across. She put her hand on her mother's wrist. Margaret's wrist was thin, thinner than Hannah remembered. "I have to go on," Hannah said. "I know. I have to, I know. I have a driller to call." "I know, Mama. What?" "I need you to sign." Margaret opened her eyes. "You signed once for Daddy." She did not finish. She did not have to. Margaret nodded. "Once. Just like Grandpa Elias." Dale Vetters lived in a single-wide trailer on a section road north of Liberal. The trailer sat at the edge of a yard full of rotary rig parts, salvage casing 2 beat-up pickups, and a corrugated metal shop the size of a small church. Hannah pulled in at 3:30. The yard smelled of diesel and cold metal. The dog did not bark. The dog had stopped barking at strangers around 1987. Dale opened the trailer door before Hannah had finished climbing the steps. He was 58 years old, broad through the shoulders, drilling mud in the creases of his hands and 3 of his knuckles. He wore a faded flannel shirt and a pair of canvas pants that had seen real labor. He looked at her. He did not smile. He did not frown. "You're Elias's girl." "Yes, sir." "I heard about today." "Okay, you'd better come in." The trailer was clean in the way that only a single man's trailer is clean. Nothing on any surface. No decoration, the smell of coffee permanent in the curtains. He sat at the small kitchen table. Hannah sat across from him. She laid out the sale bill, the state bulletin, the 1964 well record, the soil survey. Her grandfather's yellow tablet opened to the page where he had cross-referenced the appendix. Dale read. He read for 28 minutes. He did not look up once. When he was done, he stacked the papers carefully back into order, like he was returning them to their original silence. Then he tapped the test hole number with one thick finger. "I knew your grandfather," he said. Yes, sir. I drilled with him in '68. Yes, sir. He ever teach you what a dry hole costs? Yes, sir. You got it. No, sir. Dale leaned back. He did not laugh. Then what exactly are you asking me for? I need you to drill to 330 feet. Okay. If it comes in, I'll pay you first from the water lease. If it doesn't, I'll work it off. Dale stared at her hands. They were small, but they were not soft. Fence cuts, wire burns, a half-moon scar from a feed auger. You know how long work it off takes. Longer than I want. Dale almost smiled. Not quite. He folded the report closed. I'll drill one hole, he said. I stop at 330 unless I see reason to keep going. You sign the note. Your mother signs because the law says she has to. And if this is dry, nobody in this county gets to say I tricked a child. Hannah swallowed. They'll say I tricked you. Dale almost smiled. This time he made it. Let them. He held out his hand. Hannah shook it. His hand was warmer than she expected. Then he said, without warning, "There's another thing." What? Garrett Holloway called me at 1 o'clock. Hannah went still. He said he heard a rumor I was gonna drill on the Harkness quarter. Okay. He said it would be a shame if a man at my stage of life had to spend his savings on lawyers because he drilled on a parcel with disputed mineral rights. Hannah's mouth went dry. I told him I didn't take advice on my drilling from men in suits. Okay. He laughed. Okay. I didn't like the laugh. Okay. I told my wife about it. Yes, sir. She told me to drill anyway. Yes, sir. She told me, quote, that man has been getting away with his face for too long. Yes, sir. Dale put his hands flat on the table. I'm drilling Hannah. But I want you to know. He's already calling. Hannah nodded. She did not trust her voice. She nodded. She drove home with the heater finally working because the road was uphill from Liberal. She passed the sign for Hugoton. She passed the co-op. She passed the church. She did not pass the parsonage. She turned into it. Asa Beale was in the basement of the church. He had been moving boxes of donated coats. He straightened when he saw her. How? I won. You won. I won tract 4. He set the box down. Hannah Rilke. Yes, sir. For how much? 39 an acre. How? The room stopped him. What? The room. The tent. They. She did not have words for what had happened. She did not yet know that what had happened had a name. It would later. She would name it herself in 1999 when she stood at a podium and accepted a small award from the Kansas Rural Heritage Association. She would call it what the land remembers in its people. It would not be a famous phrase, but it would be hers. For now, she said Verna Marsh raised her card. Asa exhaled. And Joel Pinney. Asa closed his eyes. And Roy Lindstrand. Asa sat down on a folding chair. He put his face in his hands. He did not cry. But for a moment, Hannah thought he might. Your grandfather, he said. I know. Your grandfather kept a notebook. I have the notebook. Not that notebook. Another one. What? He kept a notebook of every person in this county who had ever been kind to him. Every person who had ever bought him coffee or fixed his fence or returned a tool. He kept it for 40 years. I didn't know. He told me once, after we'd known each other about 6 months, that if he died before he got to do the thing he wanted to do for those people, he was going to be very angry with God. Asa smiled, sad. I told him God could probably handle it. Okay, I think God did handle it. I think God handled it through your bitter card. Hannah sat down on the folding chair across from him. She told him about Dale Vetters. She told him about Holloway's phone call. Asa's smile went thin. He's escalating, Asa said. Yes, sir. Faster than I expected. Yes, sir. Hannah, listen to me. Okay. Your grandfather's letter. The line about the big room. Yes. Do you understand what he meant? I think so. Tell me. He meant. Not court. Not yet. He meant. People. He meant. A room with witnesses. Asa nodded slowly. He meant a tent, Hannah. With folding chairs, with folding cards, with folding hands, I know. He was telling you what you already did this morning. The big room is where Holloway loses, I know. But he'll try. Asa said to drag you into a small room. He will. He's already started. He called Dale. He'll call you. He'll send a lawyer. He'll send a letter. He'll get you alone in some office in Wichita with a man across a desk, and he'll make you sign things. I won't sign. I know you won't. He looked at her. Then we need to start opening the room, he said. Wider. How? I'll make some calls. Okay, it will be slow. Okay, some of them won't answer. Okay, but some of them will. Hannah stood up. She put her hand on the basement railing. She said, Pastor, yes. If this works, yes. If we find the water, yes. I want to do something with it. What? I want to give it away. Asa Beale looked at her for a long moment. His face changed. It changed the way Margit's face had changed an hour earlier when she had read the list. He said, Hannah Rilke. Yes, sir. You are going to be very tired by the time you are 20. Yes, sir. But you are going to be tired in the right direction. She did not know what to say to that. She nodded. A nod she had learned from her grandfather could mean many things. This one meant, thank you. Drilling began on March 11th, 8 days after the auction. The ground was still hard, with the last freeze of winter. The sky was the color of old tin. Dale brought his older rotary rig, the good one, the one his father had bought new in 1961. He pulled in at 6 in the morning with the mast laid down like a folded crane. The wind was up. The dust was up. The wind and the dust had not stopped since auction day. Hannah stood by the dead pond in her father's coat. Margit stood 20 feet behind her, arms crossed, lips tight. Asa Beale stood by the fence line with a thermos. Verna Marsh sat in her old Lincoln on the access road with the engine running for warmth. Joel Penny pulled up in his pickup at 6:15. Roy Lindstrand pulled up at 6:20. By 6:30, there were 11 vehicles parked along the fence. Hannah had not asked them to come. Nobody had asked them to come. They had come. Dale climbed up to the rig deck. He looked at Hannah. He said just loud enough, "You ready?" She nodded. He started the rig. The first 100 feet of any well drilled in southwest Kansas is mostly just an exercise in confirming what you already know. Dry cuttings, pale dust, a little sand. The same dirt that has been throwing itself across the prairie for 10,000 years. By 8 in the morning, they were at 92 feet. By 9, they were at 120. By 10, they were at 160. Nothing. Hannah stood in the cold without moving. Margaret brought her a coffee at one point. She drank it. She did not taste it. By noon, they were at 198 feet. Dry. 2 pickups left the fence line. Hannah saw them go. She did not look at them go. She kept her eyes on the rig. By 1 o'clock, they were at 210 feet. Dale slowed the rig. He looked down at her from the deck. He shook his head once. "Not yet," the headshake said. Hannah swallowed. She nodded. At 1:15, a black Cadillac came up the access road and parked behind Verna's Lincoln. A man got out. He was not Holloway. He was Holloway's lawyer. He wore a charcoal suit that did not belong on a section road in March. He wore black shoes that did not belong on a section road in any month. His hair was combed in a way that suggested he had checked it in the rearview mirror before getting out. He walked toward the rig. Asa Beale intercepted him. "I'm sorry," Asa said. "This is private property. I'm here to deliver legal notice. I'll take it. You're not the owner. I'll take it to the owner." The lawyer hesitated. He looked past Asa at the rig. He looked at Hannah. Hannah was still looking at the rig. The lawyer walked around Asa. He walked up to Hannah. He held out an envelope. Hannah did not take it. "Miss Rilke." She did not turn. "Miss Rilke, my client, Mr. Holloway, wishes to inform you that he holds the mineral rights to this quarter section under an instrument dated June of 1989. Any subsurface extraction, including water, is currently under dispute. Mr. Holloway has filed for an injunction in district court in Wichita this morning. The injunction is expected to be granted within 24 to 48 hours. Hannah did not move. The lawyer continued. "He further wishes to make you aware that any drilling that proceeds today is being undertaken at your risk, and at the risk of your driller, and that any water produced from this hole, should water be produced, would be subject to seizure pending the outcome of the injunction." A pause. "Mr. Holloway has authorized me to extend an alternative." Hannah still did not move. "He is prepared to offer you $9,000 cash today for the surface rights to this parcel. He is prepared to pay your driller's costs to date. He is prepared to walk away. The offer is open until 5 o'clock. Hannah turned her head. Just her head. She looked at the lawyer. She did not speak. The lawyer set the envelope on the fence rail. 5 o'clock, he repeated. He walked back to the Cadillac. The Cadillac left. Hannah watched it go. Then she turned back to the rig. Dale was watching her from the deck. She nodded at him. He kept drilling. 220 feet. 240. 260. Dry. 2 more pickups left the fence line. Now there were 7 vehicles. The wind picked up. The temperature dropped from 41 to 36. Margaret pulled her coat tighter. Verna Marsh got out of her Lincoln. She walked over to Hannah. She stood beside her without speaking. After a moment, she put her arm around Hannah's shoulders. Hannah did not lean into it. She also did not pull away. At 2:15, Dale shut down the rig. He climbed down the deck ladder. He walked over. He took off his cap. He held it at his chest. "Hannah," he said. She waited. "I told you I'd go to 3:30. Okay, I'm going to go to 3:30. Okay, but I have to tell you what I'm seeing. Okay. The cuttings. Okay. The cuttings are still dry. We're at 270. We should have started to see darker shale by now if the shale lid is where the bulletin said. We are not seeing it." Hannah did not say anything. Dale looked down at his cap. It might be a different elevation than the test hole, he said. The bed might dip. It might dip a lot. It might not dip into the part of the quarter we're sitting on. Okay. I don't know that for sure. I know. I'm gonna keep going. Okay. I just have to tell you what I'm seeing. I appreciate it. He put his cap back on. He walked back to the rig. Margaret, who had been silent for almost 3 hours, said one word. "Hannah." "What?" 5 o'clock is 2 hours away. I know. $9,000. I know. Hannah. Mama. The lawyer's envelope was still on the fence rail. Hannah did not look at it. She said, "Mama." "Yes. If I take that envelope, yes. If I take it, yes." Verna Marsh raised her card today for free. Margaret closed her mouth. She did not open it again. 275, 280, 290. Dry. The wind dropped suddenly, the way the wind sometimes does on the high plains in March. The dust settled. The light went thin and clear, the way light goes thin and clear when a high-pressure system has finally arrived. Hannah heard the change before she felt it. She closed her eyes for a moment. She thought Grandpa. She thought, if you're going to talk to me, today is a good day. She opened her eyes. The rig was still going. The cuttings were still pale. She thought, you are not going to talk to me. She thought you already did. She thought you talked to me for 8 years. She thought you are not coming back to do it again today. She thought, okay. She walked over to the fence rail. She picked up the envelope. She did not open it. She walked over to the metal trash drum where Dale's crew had been burning coffee cups and scrap paper. She dropped the envelope in. She did not light it. She just dropped it. She walked back to the rig. Verna Marsh behind her made a sound that was almost a laugh, but was not. It was the sound of a woman who had once watched her husband die behind a baler, and who had just watched a 15-year-old girl walk past the answer to that grief with both hands free. 304 feet. Dale slowed the rig. He held a damp gray shaving of shale between two fingers. He looked down at Hannah. Hannah looked at him. The shale was the lid. Verna Marsh behind Hannah made another sound. This one was a real laugh. Short, sharp, surprised. Margit took 2 steps forward. Asa Beale set down his thermos. Joel Pinney took off his cap. Roy Lindstrand crossed himself. 311 feet. The bit broke through. The first water did not roar. It came up in a hard, clear surge that shivered through the pipe and spilled over the casing, like the ground had finally taken a breath it had been holding for 1,000 years. Dale killed the rig. For 10 seconds, nobody on that fence line spoke. Then the water kept coming, clear, cold, 9 gallons a minute, under its own pressure. No pump, no assistance. Just the slow, patient memory of an inland sea that had retreated 50,000 years ago and left behind a shale lid in a confined sandstone bed, a small flowing answer to a small flowing question. Hannah did not move. She did not cry. She walked over to the casing. She knelt down. She took out her grandfather's brass meter. She unscrewed the cap. She lowered the meter into the water. She read the needle. She waited. She read the needle again, because the second reading was the one you trusted. She stood up. Her mother was at her elbow. "What does it say?" Margit whispered. "Stock water," Hannah said. "Okay. Sweet. Low conductivity. Drinkable." "Okay. Mama, what? Mama, what, Hannah, what?" Hannah turned. She looked at her mother. She said very quietly, "He was right." Margit's face broke open in a way that Hannah would remember for the rest of her life. It was not crying. It was not laughing. It was the shape grief makes when grief finds out 26 years late that it was based on a misreading. Margit put her hand over her mouth, then over her eyes. Then she sat down on the cold dirt beside the casing. She did not get up for almost 10 minutes. Hannah sat down beside her. The water ran past them both. By 4:30 that afternoon, the news had reached Hugoton. By 5, it had reached Liberal. By 6, it had reached the parts counter in Garden City. By 7, the phone at the Rilke house was ringing. It rang twice, then a third time, then a fourth. Hannah did not pick it up. Margit did not pick it up. At 7:15, Asa Beale knocked on the door. He came in. He sat at the table. He said, "Hannah." "Yes. I need you to make me a list." "Of what?" "Of every family Holloway has hurt." "Okay. Not just the 19. "Yes, sir." "Every single one." "Yes, sir." "We have until court Monday morning." "Yes, sir." "We are going to fill that courtroom." "Yes, sir." "Now." "Yes, sir." She got the cedar chest. She set it on the kitchen table. She opened it. Verna Marsh was already at the door. So was Joel Pinney. So was Roy Lindstrand. By 8:15, there were 14 people in the Rilke kitchen. By 10, there were 19. They sat around the table and the floor and the doorway. They drank coffee. They told stories. A baler, a combine, a swather, a used tractor with bad hydraulics, a loader with a cracked frame welded over, a grain auger that had taken a young man's arm in 1986, a planter that had thrown a chain through the leg of a 16-year-old in 1987, a grain dryer that had killed a 41-year-old husband in '88. The stories went around the table. The stories went around the room. The stories went on until 2 in the morning. Hannah wrote down every name. Margaret wrote down every date. Asa wrote down every piece of equipment. At 2:15, Asa stood up. He looked at the room. He said, "This is not a folder." He held up the pile of paper. "This is an indictment." Sloane Becker was 29 years old. She had grown up in a town not far from Hugoton. She had gone to law school at Tulsa. She had worked for 2 years at a corporate firm. She had quit in February. She had moved home to take care of her father who had Parkinson's. She had opened a one-room office above the hardware store on Main. She had 4 clients. On the morning of March 13, 1991, she became Hannah Rilke's lawyer. She did it for $1. She did it because Asa Beale called her at 6:30 in the morning and described what was sitting in the Rilke kitchen. She came over at 7. She sat at the table. She read the indictment. She read the indictment again. She put her hands flat on the papers. She said, "This is a state attorney general case. Okay, this is not me. Okay, but I can hold the line until the AG gets here. Okay, I can file a response to Holloway's injunction by noon. Okay, I can request a stay. Okay, I can subpoena every name on this list. Okay, I can get a continuance on the mineral rights claim while the AG looks at the bigger picture. Okay, it will not be quick. Okay, it will not be Monday. It will not even be June. Okay, it will be 2 years, maybe more. Holloway will fight. He has good lawyers. They will file every motion they can file. They will try to bleed you. They will try to bleed your mother. They will try to bleed Dale. Okay. Hannah, do you understand? I understand. Will you do it? Yes. Sloane Becker nodded. She took the indictment. She put it in a leather folio. She stood up. She said, "Then I am going to need a retainer of $1. Margaret Rilke went to her purse. She took out a single. She handed it across the table. Sloane Becker folded the dollar in half. She put it in her shirt pocket. She left. Hannah watched her go. Margaret said, "Hannah." "Yes, ma'am." 2 years. I know. What do we do for 2 years? Hannah looked at the ceiling. She thought about it. She said, "We sell water. Okay, we pay Dale. Okay, we pay the deposit balance. Okay, we fix the fence. Okay, we start the second well. The second well. Joel Pinney's place." Margaret looked at her. "What?" "The list, Mama. The list of 19. Joel was on the list. Grandpa marked Joel's quarter. Confined gravel ribbon, 230 feet. Joel doesn't know yet. Hannah, we can't. We have to. Hannah. Mama. Grandpa wasn't allowed to do it. He didn't get the time. We have the time. He gave us the time. Margaret sat down at the table. She was quiet for a long while. Then she said, "Okay, okay. You go tell Joel." "Yes, ma'am." "You go this morning." "Yes, ma'am." "And Hannah." "Yes, ma'am." "When you tell him." "Yes, ma'am." "You make him sit down before you say the words." "Yes, ma'am." "Because he is going to cry." "Yes, ma'am." "And you are not going to make a man like Joel Penny cry standing up." "Yes, ma'am." Margaret reached across the table. She took Hannah's hand. She held it for a long time. She said, "I'm sorry." "For what?" "For trying to keep you small. You weren't. I was. You were keeping me safe. It's the same thing sometimes." Hannah did not argue. She just held her mother's hand. Joel Penny sat down. Joel Penny cried. He cried for 9 minutes. Hannah did not say anything for the first 3. For the next 3, she put a glass of water on the table in front of him. For the last 3, she put her hand on his shoulder. When Joel was finished crying, he wiped his face with his sleeve. He looked up at her. He said, "Your grandfather." "Yes, sir." "Knew." "Yes, sir." "Knew the whole time." "Yes, sir." "Since when?" Hannah opened the yellow tablet to the page with Joel's parcel number. The note was dated October 1972. Joel Penny looked at the date. He looked at it for a long time. He said I was 12. "Yes, sir." He waited 19 years. "Yes, sir." For someone to read it. "Yes, sir." Joel stood up. He put on his cap. He walked out the back door of his own kitchen into the yard, into the wind. Hannah did not follow him. She let him have it. After a while, he came back in. His eyes were red but dry. He sat back down. He said, "How much?" "For what?" "For your driller." "For the well." "What does it cost?" Hannah considered. She thought about Grandpa Elias, the list, the 40 years, the yellow note. She said, "Nothing." Joel did not move. Then he said, very softly, "Don't do that, Mr. Penny. Don't do that to me, Hannah Rilke, but you take what it costs. You pay your driller. You pay your mother. You pay your school. You take what it costs, but you take what it costs. And someday, when you are 40, when you have your own girl, you teach her to read the ground." Hannah closed the yellow tablet. She nodded. A nod she had learned from her grandfather could mean many things. This one meant "I will." By the end of April, Dale Vetters had drilled Joel Penny's well. It came in at 236 feet, 11 gallons per minute. Sweet water. By the middle of May, Verna Marsh's neighbor's son had asked Hannah to come look at his place. By the 1st of June, 3 more families on the list had called. By the middle of June, the local paper had run a story. The headline was small. It read, "Young Stevens County woman reads what others missed." The story was on page 7, but it traveled. It traveled to the parts counter in Liberal. It traveled to the co-op in Hugoton. It traveled to a desk in the Kansas Attorney General's office in Topeka, where a young assistant AG named Frances Dorr read it on her lunch break called Sloan Becker and asked for a copy of whatever indictment your client is sitting on. Sloan Becker faxed it that afternoon. The fax took 41 minutes. Frances Dorr read it that night. She opened a file. She gave the file a name. She wrote in pencil at the top of the file, "The State of Kansas versus Garrett W. Holloway." She closed the folder. She went home. She did not sleep well. She would not sleep well for the next 2 years. But she would not stop either. Hannah Rilke turned 16 that summer. Her mother baked a small cake. Verna Marsh brought a tuna casserole. Asa Beale brought his guitar, which he could not really play. Joel Pinney brought a calf. A calf, said Joel. For the freezer, for the family, from a well that flowed. Hannah hugged him. She did not cry. She had run out of crying. She thought she had anyway. She would find more later. She would find more in a courtroom on November 9th, 1993. But that is the next part of the story. This part of the story ends here, with a 16-year-old girl sitting on her back porch at sunset, with a cake on the railing and a calf in the yard and a casserole in the oven, and a list of 19 names in the cedar chest behind her, and a phone that had finally stopped ringing because everyone in the county had finally accepted, after 18 weeks of evidence, that a girl who could not yet legally vote had quietly become the most consequential person in Stevens County. The wind was down. The dust was settled. The sun was going. A meadowlark was singing on the fence post. Hannah listened. She thought, "The land is still talking." She thought, "I am still listening." She thought, "We are still listening together." She thought, "Grandpa." She did not finish the thought. She did not have to. She had a long courtroom road ahead of her. She had a man named Garrett Holloway who was at that very moment in a corner office in Wichita, screaming at a lawyer about a 15-year-old girl who had cost him $11 million in projected acquisitions over the next 40 months. She had a future she had not yet imagined, but she had a porch and a cake and a casserole. And for one night on her 16th birthday in the summer of 1991, on a porch in Stevens County, Kansas, that was enough. The meadowlark went quiet. The sun finished setting. Margaret came out with 2 plates. She handed one to her daughter. She said, "Eat." Hannah ate. The cake was a little dry. She did not care. She ate every bite. 2 years passed. That is a sentence. It is not the whole sentence. The whole sentence is harder. The whole sentence is 2 years passed, and inside those 2 years, a 16-year-old girl in Stevens County, Kansas, learned what it was to wake up at 5 in the morning to do the work of a grown woman, and to fall asleep at midnight, reading legal motions in her own kitchen, and to keep doing both every day while a man named Garrett Holloway tried very hard to make her disappear. He tried. He did not succeed. But he tried. The first thing he tried was money. In July of 1991, a man in a clean blue shirt knocked on the Rilke door at 9 in the morning. He had a briefcase. He had a hand extended. He had a smile that did not quite reach his eyes. He offered Hannah $18,000 for the surface rights to Tract 4. Margaret answered the door. Margaret said no. He came back in August. He offered 26. He came back in September. He offered 41. He came back in October. He offered $75,000 cash. No questions, no paperwork. Walk away. That time, Hannah answered the door. She was 16 now. She was an inch and a half taller than she had been in March. She had let her hair grow. She said, "Mister." "Yes." "Tell your client." "Okay. Tell him I am not selling water that already belongs to people." "Okay." "And tell him." "Okay." "Tell him I read his last brief. The one about my mineral rights." "Okay." "Tell him page 11 has a citation that does not exist." The man in the blue shirt blinked. "What?" "Page 11. Footnote 40. Anders versus Cimarron. 1978. "Okay. There is no Anders versus Cimarron, 1978. "Okay." I checked. "Okay." His lawyers made it up. The man in the blue shirt did not say anything. Hannah closed the door. Inside, Margaret was at the kitchen table holding a cup of coffee. Margaret said, "Did you really check?" "Sloan and I checked." Margaret smiled. It was the first time Margaret had smiled in October. The second thing Holloway tried was Dale Vetters. In September of 1991, Dale's older rig broke down. The transmission, 41 years of service, finally tired. Dale went to the bank in Liberal for a loan to repair it. The bank said no. Dale went to the bank in Hugoton. The bank said no. Dale went to the bank in Garden City. The bank said no. Dale called Sloan Becker. Sloan made one phone call. The next morning, the bank in Garden City said yes. The loan officer at that bank, a 58-year-old woman named Pearl Westbrook, told Sloan over the phone off the record that her supervisor had received a call 3 days earlier from a Wichita attorney suggesting that doing business with Dale Vetters might create complications for the bank's commercial portfolio. Pearl Westbrook had decided after 26 years in commercial lending that she did not like being told what was complicated. So she had approved the loan. So Dale got his transmission. So the rig went back to work. So 3 more wells came in on 3 more parcels on Grandpa Elias's list of 19 between October and December of 1991. So the small wall held. The third thing Holloway tried was Margaret. This was meaner. This was uglier. This came in November. A letter arrived at the Rilke house, typed. No return address. Postmarked Kansas City. It said, okay. It said 3 things. It said, "We know about the 1985 lawsuit. We know your husband signed the maintenance agreement. We know you withdrew the appeal because you could not afford the depositions. We know your daughter is named Hannah. We know she is 16. We know she rides home from school in a 1978 pickup with a working seatbelt only on the driver's side. We know she stops at the co-op on Wednesdays. We know. It went on. Margaret read it once. Then she did something Hannah would not have predicted. Margaret did not panic. Margaret did not cry. Margaret put on her coat. Margaret drove the letter to Sloane Becker's one-room office above the hardware store. Margaret said, "Sloane." "Yes. I want this in the file." "Okay, I want it photocopied." "Okay, I want the original sent to Francis Dorr in Topeka by certified mail today." "Okay, I want a sheriff's deputy at my daughter's school tomorrow morning." "Okay, I want a different sheriff's deputy at the co-op on Wednesday." "Okay." And Sloane, "Yes. You tell Holloway's lawyers the next time you see them in a hallway." "Okay. You tell them from me personally." "Okay. You tell them that the next letter goes to the FBI in Kansas City, and that the postmark on it will not matter because the FBI has handwriting analysts and the typewriter that wrote this one has a chipped lowercase e." Sloane took out a yellow pad. She wrote it down. She said, "I will tell them." Margaret nodded. Margaret drove home. Margaret did not cry until she was inside her own kitchen with the door closed. She cried for 9 minutes. Then she stopped. Then she made supper. Then she sat across from Hannah at the table and did not say a word about the letter. Hannah found out about the letter in 2003, when she was 27, when her mother was 60. When the two of them were going through old papers and a manila folder fell out of a filing cabinet, and Margaret picked it up and looked at her daughter and said, "There is something I never told you about November of '91. Hannah read the letter that night. She did not cry. She walked into the back bedroom. She opened the cedar chest. She put the letter inside. She closed the lid. She came back out. She kissed her mother on the top of the head. She did not say anything. A kiss Hannah had learned somewhere between 15 and 27 could mean many things. This one meant, "I am here. I am still here." He did not get me. The other letters never came, because Sloane Becker did what Margaret asked. Because Sloane Becker walked into a hallway in the Sedgwick County Courthouse in December of 1991 and stood 3 feet from Holloway's lead attorney and said very quietly the exact words Margaret had told her to say. The lead attorney went pale. The lead attorney went back to his office. The lead attorney closed his door. Nobody knows exactly what was said in that office. But there were no more letters. The case moved slowly. The case moved. By March of 1992, Francis Dwyer had subpoenaed records from 3 of Holloway's business entities. By June of 1992, 2 of his former bookkeepers had agreed to testify. By August of 1992, a federal postal inspector named Ellis Garber had opened a parallel investigation into mail fraud. Because the indictment Hannah and her mother and Asa Beale had assembled on a kitchen table in March of 1991 had landed by way of Francis Dwyer's office on his desk. The investigation took most of another year. By March of 1993, Holloway had been arrested at his home in Wichita on charges of equipment fraud, contract fraud, and 1 count of conspiracy to commit interstate mail fraud. The arrest made the Wichita paper. It made the Topeka paper. It made a small note in 3 or 4 regional dailies. It did not make the New York Times. That was fine. That was in fact exactly the size of justice Hannah wanted. She did not want a national story. She wanted a Stevens County verdict. The trial began on November 9th, 1993, a Monday. Cold. Snow on the ground but melting. Hannah was 17 years old. She was a senior at Hugoton High School. She had skipped the morning of school. She had signed in at the courthouse with her mother. She was wearing a dark blue dress that Margaret had bought her at a thrift store in Liberal for the occasion. The dress did not fit perfectly. Hannah did not care. The courtroom was on the second floor of the Sedgwick County Courthouse in Wichita. 12 rows of pews. Each pew held about 10 people. The courtroom held about 120. There were 147 people in it on November 9th. They were standing along the walls. They were sitting on the steps in the aisle. They were in the hallway outside, peering in through the open doors. They had come from Stevens County. They had come from Morton County. They had come from Seward Grant Haskell. A few had come from Texas County, Oklahoma, just across the line. Verna Marsh was there. Joel Pinney was there. Roy Lindstrand was there. Asa Beal was there. Dale Vetters was there. Pearl Westbrook from the bank in Garden City was there. 19 of the families on Grandpa Elias's list were there. All of them. Every single one. The Pinneys had brought their kids. The Crawfords had brought their grandmother, who was 91 years old and had not left her house in 14 months. Old Mrs. Brackett had brought a casserole which the bailiff had politely confiscated at the door. Because as he explained, the courtroom was not really a casserole sort of place. Mrs. Brackett had asked him to please keep it for after. The bailiff had agreed. A widow named Carleen Pruitt, whose husband had died behind a grain dryer in 1988, had come with her 3 sons, all of them grown. A small, thin woman named Joan Eskelson, whose son had lost an arm to a Holloway-sold auger in 1986, had come with her son. Her son was now 27 years old. He sat with the empty sleeve of his shirt pinned neatly to the shoulder. They were all there. They were all silent. When Garrett Holloway was brought in through the side door at 8:51 a.m. in handcuffs, in a gray suit that no longer fit him as well as it had in March of 1991, the only sound in the courtroom was the small, steady mechanical breath of the radiator under the window. He looked at the room. He scanned the pews. He saw. He stopped scanning. He sat down. He did not look at Hannah. He did not look at anyone. The case lasted 7 days. Frances Dwyer, 34 years old, in a brown wool suit, called 26 witnesses. She did not raise her voice once. She did not need to. The witnesses raised it for her. Verna Marsh testified about a baler that had a known faulty knotter assembly, which Garrett Holloway had personally sold to her husband Harlan in 1983, and which had killed Harlan in 1984, when a strip pin disengaged the safety stop during a routine clearance check. Joan Eskelson testified about an auger her son had bought at age 20 in 1986. Carleen Pruitt testified about her husband. Frances Dorr called a name the courtroom did not expect. Margaret Rilke. Margaret walked to the stand. She put her hand on the Bible. She swore. She sat down. Frances Dorr asked her one question. Mrs. Rilke, on October 9th, 1985, your husband, Wendell Rilke, was killed by a combine. Where did that combine come from? Margaret looked at the judge. The judge nodded. Margaret said, "From a dealership in Liberal, Kansas. Who owned that dealership at the time of purchase? Garrett Holloway. Did the combine have a known defect that had not been disclosed? Yes, ma'am. Did you attempt to bring a civil suit at the time? Yes, ma'am. What was the outcome? I lost. Why?" Margaret took a breath. She said, "Because I could not afford the lawyer I needed. And the judge that year was a friend of the dealer." Francis Durr nodded. No further questions. Margaret stepped down. She did not look at Holloway as she passed him. She did not have to. He could feel her not looking. A man named Wendell Spur, no relation to Hannah's father, testified about a swather. A woman named Loretta Hinkle testified about a planter. A man named Garrison Vaults testified about a loader. Pearl Westbrook testified about a phone call she had received from Holloway's attorney in September of 1991. The defense objected. The defense objected often. The defense objected with the practiced fluency of expensive lawyers who had been paid in advance and who knew in their bones that they were losing. The judge, a 63-year-old woman named Eleanor Tilford, sustained some objections. She overruled most of them. She had, in 1982, lost a cousin to a Holloway-sold post-hole digger. She had not recused herself. She had not been asked to recuse herself. It would not, in the end, matter. On the third day, Francis Durr called Hannah Rilke. Hannah walked to the stand in her too large blue dress. She put her hand on a Bible. She swore. She sat down. The courtroom was so quiet that the radiator was loud. Francis Durr stood up. She said, "Miss Rilke." "Yes, ma'am." "How old are you?" 17. "How old were you on March 3rd, 1991? 15. "What did you do on March 3rd, 1991? "I bought a piece of land." "Where?" "Stevens County, 13 miles south of Hugoton, the Harkness Quarter, Tract 4. "For how much?" $39 an acre. "With what money?" $682 in cash. "Where did the money come from?" "I saved it." "Doing what?" "Bottle calves, eggs, walking fences, repairing fences, chopping ice on stock tanks for a neighbor in the winter of 1989. "How long did it take you to save it?" 3 years, 3 months. "Why did you spend it on that piece of land?" "There was water under it." "How did you know?" "My grandfather." "What was your grandfather's name?" "Elias Rilke." "What did your grandfather do for a living?" "He was a soil conservation officer." "For how long?" 40 years. "What did he leave you when he died?" "A cedar chest." "What was in it?" 40 years of work. Francis Durr paused. She walked back to her table. She picked up a manila envelope. She walked back to the stand. She handed Hannah the envelope. She said, "Miss Rilke, do you recognize this?" Hannah opened the envelope. She looked inside. She nodded. "Yes, ma'am." "What is it?" "A list." "Of what?" 19 families. "Why was your grandfather keeping this list?" "Because he wanted to give them their land back." What do you mean? I mean, she paused. She took a breath. I mean, he had been studying their parcels for years. He had been finding their water. He had been planning to give the information away. He died before he could. What happened to the list after he died? I read it. What did you do? I went to one of the names. Whose? Joel Penny's. What did you tell him? I told him there was water on his quarter at 236 feet. Was there? Yes, ma'am. Have other families on the list been drilled? 6 of them. How many came in? All 6. Frances Dorr looked at the jury. She did not say anything. She just let the silence sit there. Then she said, Miss Rilke. One more question. Yes, ma'am. When you bought Tract 4, was Garrett Holloway in that auction tent? Yes, ma'am. Did he bid against you? Yes, ma'am. How high did he bid? $57 an acre. Why did he stop? Because 11 other people in that tent started bidding. Why? Because. Hannah looked at the pews. She saw Verna. She saw Joel. She saw Roy. She saw Asa. She saw her mother. She said, because they had been waiting for 40 years to stand up. Frances Dorr nodded. She said, no further questions. The defense did not cross. The defense had decided not to cross. The defense knew by the 3rd day that any question they asked Hannah Rilke would be the question their client lost the case on. So they let her go. Hannah stepped down from the stand. She walked back to her seat. She did not look at Holloway. She did not have to. She could feel him watching her. Something else happened on Hannah's way out of the courtroom that afternoon. Holloway's lead attorney, walking past her in the aisle, said something low to his client. Holloway laughed. 3 short bursts. The second higher than the first. The third lower than both. Hannah heard it. She waited for the old chest pain. The one she had felt in March of 1991 when she had thought for a single terrible second that this man's laugh was her father's laugh. The pain did not come. The laugh was just a laugh now. 3 sounds. From a stranger. She had stopped looking for her father in other men's voices. She had been looking for him for a long time. She did not need to anymore. She had found him in the cedar chest, in the yellow note, in the list of 19 names, in the way Joel Penny had cried at his own kitchen table, in her mother's hand across her own hand at 2 in the morning in a kitchen the night before everything began. He had been there the whole time. She walked out of the courtroom. The verdict came down on November 17th, 1993, a Wednesday, snow falling lightly outside the courthouse windows. The jury foreman, a 52-year-old electrician from Wichita named Kurt Demery, stood up. He read. He read for 6.5 minutes. There were 41 counts. Mail fraud, wire fraud, equipment fraud, contract fraud, 3 counts of negligent homicide, 2 counts of reckless endangerment, conspiracy of 41 counts. Holloway was found guilty on 38. The 3 he was acquitted on were minor. The 38 he was convicted on were not. When Kurt Demery finished reading, Judge Eleanor Tilford asked Holloway to stand. Holloway stood. Judge Tilford set sentencing for January 18, 1994. She declined to release Holloway on bail pending sentencing, citing flight risk. She had Holloway taken back into custody. The deputies cuffed him. They walked him out the side door. He passed within 4 feet of Hannah Rilke on his way out. He did not look at her. He did not have to. She did not look at him either. She did not have to. On the courthouse steps in the snow, Frances Dorr embraced Hannah. Hannah did not cry. She had cried twice already that morning. In the bathroom. Quietly. Both times before 9 a.m. She was done crying for the day. Margaret was crying. Margaret was crying for the first time in 2 years in front of other people. Verna Marsh held Margaret by both shoulders. Verna Marsh said, "He's done." Margaret nodded. "He is done, child." Margaret nodded. Your husband. Your husband. Your husband." Margaret nodded. Verna did not finish. She did not have to. The 2 women held each other for a long time. The snow fell. The courthouse bells rang 12 noon. The 47 people from Stevens County who had ridden the bus down to Wichita that morning began slowly to gather their coats and to find their way back to the bus and to drive home in the snow in the early winter dark of the Kansas plains, knowing that tomorrow morning the wells would still flow, and the cattle would still drink, and the fences would still need fixing, and the world would not in any fundamental way be different. Except that one man who had taken so much was finally done taking. Sentencing came in January. 32 years, no parole eligibility until year 22. Holloway was 66 when he became eligible for parole. He did not get it. He served 26 years and 4 months. He died in federal custody in early 2019 of complications from prostate cancer at the age of 70. His obituary was 4 lines long. It did not mention Stevens County. It did not mention a 15-year-old girl in a brown coat, but Stevens County remembered. Stevens County remembered very well. Hannah Rilke graduated from Hugoton High School in May of 1994. She did not go to a 4-year college that fall. She enrolled at the community college in Liberal. She took agronomy. She took hydrology. She took business. She drove home every Friday. She worked Saturday and Sunday on the well system. She managed water leases for 5 different ranchers by the end of her first semester. By 1996, she was managing 12. By 1997, she was managing 21. By 1998, she had paid off Dale Vetters in full with a bonus that Dale accepted only because his wife told him she would divorce him if he didn't. By 1999, at 23 years old, Hannah Rilke hung a small hand-painted sign on the side of a metal office building just east of the rebuilt windmill on Tract 4. The sign said, Rilke Groundwater and Range. Below that, Hannah Rilke Property. Below that, we read. That was the whole sign. Margaret was her bookkeeper. Verna Marsh came every morning at 7 for coffee. Asa Beale came every Thursday afternoon to talk through the week. Sloan Becker had a permanent retainer of $200 a month. Dale Vetters drilled exclusively for her by 2001. The list of 19 families had become a list of 46 by 2000. By 2005, it was 81. By 2010, it was over 200. Hannah did not charge for the readings. She charged only for the drilling, and only at cost. She paid herself a small salary. She lived modestly. She did not marry. She did not, in any of the ways the magazines like to measure, become famous. She did become in southwest Kansas, and the Oklahoma Panhandle and parts of the eastern Colorado Plain, a kind of legend that people told in low voices around late-night kitchen tables. She was the girl who read the ground. She was the girl who turned a tent. She was the girl who put Garrett Holloway in prison. She was, by 2007, 31 years old, slow to laugh fast, to think gentle with the elderly, and famously short with anyone who tried to sell her something. In May of 2007, an old white Buick pulled up to the gate of Rilke Groundwater and Range. The Buick was clean in the way that only old men's cars are clean. The driver was Marlon Crisp. He was 78 years old. He was slowed by bad knees and a cough that stayed too long every winter. He had not seen Hannah Rilke in a long time. He had, however, watched her from a distance for 16 years. He had read the small stories in the small papers. He had asked casually at the co-op in Hugoton about how the Rilke girl was doing. He had heard about every well. He had heard about Holloway. He had heard about the courtroom. He had not in 16 years ever come to see her. He did today. He sat in the Buick for almost 10 minutes before he got out. He had something in his hand. It was small. It was rectangular. It was made of cardboard. It was a bitter card, the original, from March 3rd, 1991. The number on it was 18. It was his. He had kept it in a drawer in his kitchen for 16 years and 2 months. He got out of the Buick. He took off his hat. He held it in both hands. He walked up to the office door. Hannah came out. She was wiping ink from her fingers. She was 31 years old. Her hair was longer. The weather had written itself into her face, the way it writes itself into anyone who spends enough years listening to land instead of just owning it. She did not look like a girl anymore. She had not looked like a girl in a long time. She stopped on the porch. She recognized him. She did not smile. She did not frown. She said, "Mr. Crisp, Hannah, come in." He did not move. He said, "I want to do this out here." Okay. He looked toward the rebuilt windmill. He looked toward the casing on the west side of the pond where the original well of 1991 still flowed. He looked at his hands. He said, "I shook your hand after the sale in 1991. Yes, sir. Because of your grandfather. Okay. Not because of you. Okay. I heard the depth. I heard the bulletin. I heard the shale lid. I heard all of it. Okay. I still thought you were repeating a thing you didn't understand. Okay. I have been ashamed of that. Okay, for 16 years. Okay." He took a long breath. There were a lot of moments along the way, he said, when I could have done more, said more, stood up sooner. Okay, Holloway was selling bad equipment in this county before your grandfather ever brought it up. I knew it. I sold cattle for some of those families after they lost their farms. I knew where the trouble had come from. Okay, I never said it. Okay. I sold cattle for Holloway twice. He paid on time. He shook my hand. Okay, I am sorry, Hannah. Hannah did not answer right away. She walked off the porch. She walked over to the casing. She put 2 fingers in the water. She held them there. She did not speak for a long time. Then she said, "Mr. Crisp." "Yes." "Come here, please." He walked over. She said, "Put your hand in." He looked at her. Then he knelt. It took him a long time to kneel. His knees were bad. He was 78 years old. He was a tall man who had not knelt in years. He put 2 fingers in the water. The water was cold. The water was clear. The water came up from the dead place every man in that tent had written off. Marlon Crisp held his hand in the water for almost a minute. Then he straightened. He dried his fingers on a handkerchief. He looked at Hannah. He said, "We all thought the auction was deciding the value." Hannah looked at the water. She said, "The auction was only deciding who had read the file." Marlon Crisp laughed, short, soft, tired. He held out the bidder card. "This is yours," he said. Hannah took it. She looked at the back. Marlon had written something on it. Shaky hand, recent ink. It said number 18 knew the ground before the gavel did. And the people, too. Hannah read it twice. The second time was the one she trusted. She said, "Thank you, Mr. Crisp." He nodded. He put his hat back on. He walked back to the Buick. He drove away. That was the last time Hannah ever saw him. He died 3 months later. October. In his sleep. 81 years old by then. His widow mailed Hannah his auctioneer's gavel. There was a small note inside the package. It said, "He kept this for 61 years. He wanted you to have it." Hannah put the gavel on the shelf above the cedar chest. She put the bidder card next to it. She put her grandfather's brass meter next to that. She put the yellow tablet next to that. She put Holloway's manila envelope with the trial documents inside next to that. She put the typed letter from November 1991 next to that. She put a small black and white photograph of her father holding her on his lap when she was 3 next to that. The shelf got crowded. That was okay. The shelf was supposed to be crowded. In the spring of 2012, Hannah Rilke turned 36. A girl came to the office that May. The girl was 12. The girl was named Iris. The girl's mother had driven her out from a town 2 counties over because someone had told someone who had told someone that the Rilke woman could maybe help. The girl's family was about to lose their place. Hannah sat across from the girl in the kitchen of the small office. She made the girl a cup of cocoa. She did not give the girl's mother any false hope. She just sat down with the girl, with a county soil map, with a parcel number, with a yellow legal pad. She said, "What do you see when you walk your pasture in October?" The girl said, "I see grass." "What kind of grass?" "Buffalo. Some grama. Some blue stem on the north side." "Where does the buffalo change color?" "By the southwest corner." "How do you know?" I see it. It goes lighter there." "How much lighter?" "Maybe 2 shades." Hannah looked at the girl. She looked at her for a long time. She said, "Iris, yes. Can you come back next Saturday?" "Yes." "Bring boots." "Okay." "Bring a pencil." "Okay." "And bring whichever grandparent you love the most," the girl thought. She said, "My grandma." "Okay, bring her." "Why?" "Because some things take more than one person to remember." By 2018, Iris was 18 years old and a freshman at Kansas State. By 2020, she was reading test holes. By 2023, she had her name on the side of the building. The sign now read, "Rilke and Woodhall Groundwater and Range." Below that, we read. That was still the whole sign. Margit Rilke lived to be 79 years old. She died on a Sunday in November of 2031. She was buried next to Wendell. The headstone was simple. Hannah, who was 55 by then, did not cry at the funeral. She had run out of crying again. She would find more later. She always found more later. That was the trick of grief she had learned by then. You always found more. The trick was not running out. The trick was knowing where you had set it down the last time. The years took everyone the way years do. Asa Beale outlasted 3 pastors who came after him. Verna Marsh outlasted everyone almost. She made it past 90 baking casseroles until the last spring of her life. Joel Pinney died on his own porch watching his grandson move cattle. Dale Vetters drilled wells into his late 70s until his hands could not hold the wrench anymore. Sloan Becker became a judge. She did good work. Hannah went to all of their funerals. She did not give eulogies. She just sat in the back. She listened. That was the kind of remembering she had learned from her grandfather. The kind you did with your eyes open and your mouth closed. In the fall of 2034, on a clear October day, when Hannah was 58 years old, and the prairie had turned the colors that only southwest Kansas turns in October, a woman from a small public radio station drove out to interview her. The woman was 40-something. She had a recorder. She had a notepad. She had been doing a series on people in rural America who had quietly changed their counties. She sat with Hannah on the porch of the small office. She turned on the recorder. She said, "Miss Rilke." "Yes." "You were 15 years old when you bought Tract 4. "Yes." "Looking back, with all of it, the auction, Holloway, the trial, the 40 years of your grandfather's records, the wells, the girl you trained." "Yes." "What do you think you did really?" Hannah thought about it. She thought about it for a long time. The recorder hummed. The wind moved gently through the buffalo grass past the fence. A meadowlark somewhere out by the casing sang. Hannah said, "I read what they skipped." "Okay. That's what my grandfather told me to do." "Okay. That's all I did." The woman waited. She knew the way good interviewers know that the question was not done. After a long moment, Hannah added, "But I learned something he didn't." "What?" "He thought he had to read the ground." "Okay, he did. But that wasn't the whole thing." "Okay. You have to read the people, too." The woman nodded. She did not ask another question for a while. She let the answer sit. Then she said, gently, "Miss Rilke, one last thing. Yes. If a 15-year-old girl came to you today, okay, with $600 in an envelope, okay, and a folded map, okay, what would you tell her?" Hannah looked out at the prairie. She looked at the rebuilt windmill. She looked at the casing where the water still came up from 311 feet. All these years later. Slower than it used to, but still steady, still clear, still cold. She said I would tell her 3 things. Okay, I would tell her read the fine print. Okay, I would tell her bring a friend. Okay. The woman waited. Hannah turned and looked at her directly. She smiled. Small, tired, real, and yes, I would tell her the loudest bidder is never the buyer. The woman wrote it down. She turned off the recorder. She thanked Hannah. She drove away. The interview aired 3 weeks later on a Sunday morning on a small radio station that broadcast out of a tower in Garden City. About 40,000 people in southwest Kansas heard it. A few thousand more across the line in Oklahoma. A scattering in eastern Colorado. A handful in the Texas Panhandle. It was not a national story. That was, in fact, exactly the size of justice Hannah Rilke had always wanted. A Stevens County verdict. A Stevens County peace. A Stevens County kind of remembering. That was enough. It had always been enough. The wind moved. The dust settled. The land kept records, even when people did not. A 15-year-old girl in March of 1991 had walked into a canvas tent with $682 and a folded blue map. A grown woman decades later sat on a porch in October light and watched her county come home to itself. Between those 2 moments, a whole life. Between those 2 moments, 19 families. Then 46. Then 81. Then more. Between those 2 moments, one man who had taken so much undone. Between those 2 moments, a mother who had been afraid for so long finally able to set the fear down. Between those 2 moments, a grandfather who had died on the concrete floor of a machine shed in January of 1990 finally answered. He had asked one thing of her: read what they skip. She had. For the rest of her life, she had. And the land remembered. And the people remembered. And the meadow lark on the fence post by the office kept singing, the way meadow larks do, the way they have always done, the way they always will.